And that's one of the things I want to, emphasize to people is that if you can eliminate some of some of these issues, some of the challenges that you have, if you have something you can hang to, if you can anchor on, if you have experience and knowledge and you have some things that are working right, and then you can control your attitude and your feelings about things. When everything is wrong and when you're miserable, and the winter is one of those times when a lot of things can go wrong and it's very easy to get miserable out there, it's very difficult to keep your attitude up. And if you lose your attitude, we're talking in a survival situation, in an emergency situation, if you lose your attitude, you can very easily lose your life because you just quit. You just get to the exasperated, physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted to the point where you simply say, I can't keep doing this, and so you just literally stop. And if somebody isn't there to rescue your hiney, you just curl up in a ball and it's all over. And that happens a lot to a lot of people where they quit. So it is critical to find ways to keep yourself going. Attitude is extremely important, but if you're suffering in all areas of your physical life, it's difficult to keep your attitude up. So one of the reasons we look at being comfortable, it's not because we're wimpy. It's not because we're just a bunch of softies, but quite frankly, pain and misery, and cold in particular, cold is unusual in its ability to drain your emotions, drain yourself physically, physiologically, mentally, and emotionally. Being cold is very, very tough on you. And as you go into hypothermia, you have literally things in your body that starts to shut down and close down, and you just don't have the capacity to keep going. And that's why I do so much of my work in this area of cold weather and winter and helping people to be prepared for it, because you can have everything else working perfectly, and if you're cold and suffering in the cold and going into hypothermia, your food and your water and all your other things will not be enough to get you through. You've got to maintain core temperature. It's all about maintaining your internal temperature. I really appreciate your experience and what you went through and some of the learning that you're exemplifying, because there was a lot of things that were not right, but the fact that you weren't cold allowed you to be okay through this whole first experience. And the first one was a little rougher because, again, some of the things were not quite completed, and this is your first time. I mean, you're doing something that's just like, how about wacko? People don't do what you were doing out there.
Yeah, it was amazing that and there were some of the challenges were really extreme, which the next time we went up, we did things to solve those, and our clothes were a little bit more complete at that point, and so there's a lot of things, and we'd solved the technical problem with Connie's boots, and so the second time we went up there thinking, okay, we're great, and then we had another challenge, and so each time there was a different challenge that we had to overcome.
That's really what the experience is all about, and that's the reason we go in very controlled situations, because if a challenge becomes too much, you bail out. There are periodically, I've seen this happen with people, that they get a little information, they watch a movie, they read a book or something like that, somebody that's been doing something, and then they want to go out there and do what he did, but they just go all the way. You know, you have somebody that's been working up to these things for years and trying a little bit and getting it all down pat, and so they spent, several years building up to the point to do something. Somebody watches that in a television program or in a movie or reads a book and says, by golly, I can do that, and so they go sit on top of this mountain peak, and something wasn't right, they get themselves in trouble, and sometimes they die when they do that. So what you're illustrating also is the fact that you came, you put up with difficulties, you got through it, yet you had a good experience, at least it was interesting enough you could call it good, so that you could come back having solved those problems. And what it is, it's like climbing stairs. You're taking it one step at a time, moving up to a higher level. Let's talk about that second time. I mean, now some people would look at you and say, well, you didn't learn your lesson the first time, did you? You came back again about 3 weeks later. You came back and we did it again. Why did you do that?
Well, because we had made some changes and we wanted to check those out. And then we ran into another challenge, and we've since done some things to solve that challenge. And so there may be other challenges ahead, but I think we've got the basic things taken care of. And we know what we need to do. And, if it was just a matter of being out in the cold and surviving, I think we're going to be able to do that just fine.
I'd like to add something to that. My reason for going the second time was we did want to check things out, improvements that we had made, but it was also that in spite of the challenges, I really enjoyed the first time. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. In the morning, watching the sun come up through the trees that looked like a fairyland. There was a glittery kind of look to the trees, and it was the most magnificent, beautiful scene I have ever seen. It was gorgeous. Watching the fog as it lifted off of the valley below us as the sun came up, and just the beauty of it, the quiet and stillness. It was just beautiful, and I wanted to experience that again. I wanted to be able to do that, to see those things, that the nature, that I had never experienced that part of nature before, and it was just, there's just not words to describe it. It was just fabulous.
And that is one of the reasons that I have always gone. It's not a macho thing. It's not to prove how tough I am or anything like that. I go because it's extraordinary. I go because it's beautiful. I go, as you say, like when the sun was coming up, it was breathtakingly still, and it had snowed. On the first trip, it had snowed, so everything was covered up and everything was just beautifully fresh and clean, and you just don't get to see that very often. So, yeah, that's the reason I've gone for decades, to see things and smell and taste and feel and watch things you cannot see any other way. So there's a real bonus in going. This is not just about, emergency preparedness training and we're going to get a bunch of skills. Frankly, it's breathtaking. It's a wonderful thing to do. So that's a good reason to go, and thank you for sharing those thoughts there. Now, back to this second trip. Okay, you wanted to come because you saw beauty that you hadn't seen before, and that's kind of a draw. You did want to check out and change some things, but now what was your attitude about going out this second time in terms of what you were feeling, the anxiousness or the fear or those kinds of things? What were you feeling, Connie?
I was excited about going. I just felt like that it was going to be a piece of cake. I knew I would be warm. I was looking forward to it. I had no intention of not completing the trip until I got there and then found out I had to hike up to the top of the mountain because the snow was too soft for the snowmobile to take me up. And that became quite a challenge for me to figure out how I was going to hike up there. But I worked through it. My angels came to my rescue and brought me some snowshoes and taught me how to use them to help me get up the hill. And I made it and had another wonderful experience. But just knowing that I did it the first time and knowing that I was able to stay warm, I slept through the night, I slept well, I wasn't wet and cold, I knew that I could do it again.
Yeah. When you slept through it, both these times we were not in tents. You were not in a tent. You were not in a snow cave. You weren't in an igloo. You weren't in a snow house. You were right out there in the open in your sleeping system. It's a sleeping bag and some other components. Mm-hmm. In this case, wrapped up on a plastic sheet.
A plastic sheet right on the ground, right on the snow, right on the mountainside, just under the stars. In fact, when it quit snowing, I woke up, and after I got the snow off the top of me, the sky was beautiful. It was just clear. It looked like I could touch the stars. They were so bright and clear and beautiful. It was just magnificent not having a tent to keep me from seeing the beauty there.
It's one of the problems with a tent. You can't see anything. You look at the inside of a tent, and it's pretty boring. That's why I like sleeping out where I can see when conditions allow. It's a marvelous thing to do. So your attitude had changed. And the thing that caused your attitude to change was the experience that you had that gave you knowledge, and that's the point. When we talk about the law of provident living, which is, again, the order of spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and stuff, the spiritual is the foundation for everything, but it's our attitude that's going to let us get through. And if you lose your attitude, it's really hard on you in many areas. But you change your attitude about things by getting knowledge. Knowledge is information multiplied by experience. You have to get true, correct, credible information, multiply it by the right experience. All of a sudden you have knowledge that says, I can do this. This is not a big deal. Mm-hmm. It changes your whole outlook on things. Okay. And now the second trip, by the way, it was colder. The first one we were in a snowstorm all the time, and when it's snowing, it's generally warmer. If I remember right, it was 15 degrees after it stopped snowing on the first one. We were sitting out there in this snowstorm. Now, here's another thing. No shelter, no poncho, no raincoat, no nothing. You're just in this clothing. And by the way, it's one-layer clothing. You're sitting out there, and you got this snow hanging all over you in this first trip. And so, like, were you soaking wet or what?
There was snow all over me, but I was not wet on the inside. And I went to bed with, like you tell us to, I went in and got in my sleeping system. I left all my outside clothes on except for my boots. I took my shells off that were my boots. They're kind of bulky. I took those off, but I left everything else on as I crawled in with the snow. I took the snow into bed with me, and I was not wet. When I woke up, I was dry.
Now, what you just described is breaking what we would call the traditional rules of snow camping. And I do make that point. We do break some traditional rules. Now, we don't break the laws of physics. We don't break the laws of nature, but we do break some of the traditions that we have been taught about how we live out there. Of course, you have to do it the right way, because if you don't have the skills and or the knowledge and or the materials, if you will, in this case the clothing, that's going to allow you to do that, you can get yourself in trouble. So you went to bed with this snowed-on clothing and left it all on, which is breaking a rule, went to bed. You didn't get wet during the night. You stayed dry, and you got up in the morning and you're warm and dry. Now, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty weird, but it really happened.
In other winter camps I've gone on, you don't take anything but basically your body and underwear into the sleeping bag, which was real fun in the morning, putting it all back on.
Yeah, you don't take those things to bed with you because they usually have a lot of moisture in them. Yeah. And then that's going to build up inside of your sleeping bag, and then you're going to have a wet sleeping bag, which is really awful. I've been there, done that, and in the old days when we're doing it the old way.
Well, then you've got to do it in reverse, and at that point, everything is frozen. So you're putting on frozen clothing, and for some reason that's supposed to be the right thing to do. It's probably about as painful as having somebody hit you with a leather strap while you're getting dressed.
Yeah, it's pretty much abuse. And, again, that's the way we used to do it back in the late 50s and early 60s when we were camping, snow camping the traditional way. It was like, take your wet clothing off, don't take it to bed with you, and then in the morning you have to put the wet clothing on. Of course, then the wet clothing is now frozen into this lump, and so you're putting on this icy clothing. And that's really a dumb thing to do, quite frankly, was my conclusion. So we break some rules, traditional rules. But we don't break the laws of nature. We don't break the laws of physics. So now your attitude is allowing you to look at this winter a little bit differently than the way you might have looked at winters before. Tell us a little bit about what you're looking forward to.
How many times have I already asked you this fall, Jim, when we get to go snow camping? I think it's been at least 5 times. When are we going to have our next snow camp?
I'm going to have to apologize for having just totally corrupted you, just messing you up. Is that what I've done? I've just kind of messed you up.
Yeah, I believe so, because I am actually looking forward to having enough snow in the mountains that we can go snow camping again, to be able to go out. And we actually got some snowshoes so that I won't sink in the snow as much. We want to prepare ourselves with the next couple of snow colleges series, because we really want to go on this trip above the Arctic Circle and be able to do this for an extended period of time. And so we're looking forward to the training that's involved to be able to do that. And it's been such a motivating factor for me that I've actually lost 75 pounds since we went to our last snow camp, which I think will help me tremendously in being able to move around a little bit better this time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
You're going to have to make some adjustments to your clothing, huh?
I have to remake my clothing, yes. That's my project right now, is I'm actually starting to make me some new clothing because my clothing doesn't fit me now.
Well, this is a lot of fun.